President Trump is pushing to broker a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. But after a nearly 2-hour phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin, challenges remain.
This was definitely not the outcome that Trump was hoping for from the call. He had got the Ukrainians to agree to a 30-day full ceasefire in the air, on the seas, along the battlefield in Ukraine, and he expected Putin to reciprocate. Putin had said, actually a few days earlier, that he is willing in principle to agree to a ceasefire if a bunch of issues were ironed out. But I think Trump definitely hoped, especially in a 2-hour call with Putin, to get some kind of agreement for this ultimately at the end of the call, and he didn't get that.
During the call, Putin agreed to halt attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure.
But just this morning we saw an overnight Russia and Ukraine exchanged attacks on each other, which suggests that ceasefire is not as immediate as the Kremlin readout may have suggested.
Despite saying he supports peace, so far, Putin has stopped short of accepting a full, immediate ceasefire.
Putin's certainly playing the long game here. He understands that the longer he drags those negotiations out, the more land his military can take in Ukraine because it's moving forward and because Ukraine is very much under pressure in terms of the manpower that it can bring to the fight and the weapons that it can bring to the fight, because deliveries from the West are not as robust and regular as they used to be. And so for Putin, this is ultimately a chance to gain more territory that he will keep in any peace deal.
Since his inauguration, most of Trump's pressure has been directed at Ukraine. Washington cut off military aid and intelligence sharing to Kyiv after a contentious Oval Office meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
After Kyiv agreed to a 30-day ceasefire, the US restored aid.
It definitely doesn't seem like the US is applying the same amount of pressure on Russia to come to the negotiating table and agree to a ceasefire. But the main reason for that is, of course, that Russia is not dependent on the US in the way that Ukraine is.
Zelensky said Ukraine supports all steps to ending the war and has criticised Putin for not agreeing to an unconditional ceasefire. A day after his call with Putin, Trump said in a social media post that he had a very good phone conversation with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to, quote, align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs.
Було за ніч 150 дронів, в тому числі по об'єктах енергетики. Удари були по транспорту, удари були, вражено було, на жаль, 2 лікарні по звичайній міській інфраструктурі. Тобто слова Путіна дуже розходяться з реальністю.
Well, Ukraine is incredibly cautious during this whole process. It's incredibly cautious of any calls between the US and Russia. They're very, very worried and concerned that some kind of deal about Ukraine